Welcome back to the 90th online episode of Peacetime, hosted every Sunday morning by Peace Point with myself, Phra Nicholas Thanissaro, coming to you today from DIMC in Azusa, California. In the previous session, we looked at the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, and today we continue on our journey through an anthology of important suttas from the Buddhist scriptures by looking at the Jāṇussoṇī Sutta. I estimate today's session will run to about an hour and 10 minutes with a 40-minute break halfway through for some meditation. So as usual with our chosen sutta, we will work our way through the sequence of sources, sutta name meaning, interlocutors, place names and overview, for looking at the main body of the manuscript itself and some of the issues the sutta raises, and finishing with some relevant questions sent in by viewers. Today we are looking at the Jāṇussoṇī Sutta, which comes from the Anguttara Nikaya, sometimes translated as the numerical or gradual sayings, Book of Tens, and is referenced A5269 or AN 10.177. So for the translation of the primary source, we are using the 1994 reprint from a 1936 original by Frank Woodward and Caroline Reese Davids, Pali Text Society translation of Volume 5 of the Book of Gradual Sayings as our manuscript. A less archaic 2012 Wisdom Publications translation of the Numerical Discourses by Bhikkhu Bodhi is also available for the same sutta, but I didn't have a copy to hand. So starting with the meaning of the sutta's name, Jāṇussoṇī is the name of the Brahmin who asked the question that sparked off this teaching. Sutta, of course, means discourse, so putting all the parts together, the sutta name would mean the discourse to Jāṇussoṇī. Although I should mention that there are at least two other Jāṇussoṇī suttas in different parts of the Tipitaka, one to do with Tevijja Brahmins and another to do with the existence or non-existence of reality, because the Buddha had several conversations with the same person. Also, to add to the confusion, there are several discourses between the Buddha and Jāṇussoṇī that are not called the Jāṇussoṇī Sutta, for example, the Bhayabhairava Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya. So this sutta is a conversation between the Buddha, who is referred to as Master Gotama or the Exalted One, and the eminent Brahmin Jāṇussoṇī. Despite being a Brahmin, Jāṇussoṇī was a great follower and admirer of the Buddha, in the habit of talking to well-known teachers of other schools and hearing their opinions for the purpose of comparing their views with his own. The Buddha also preached to Jāṇussoṇī on other occasions, on topics such as overcoming the fear of death, the results of actions, and seeing the value of good actions for oneself. Apparently, Jāṇussoṇī had a white chariot with silver fittings and white trappings drawn by 4 pure white mares. He would drive about in this, wearing white garments, turban cloths and sandals, and fanned by a white fan, with matching white reins, goads, and a canopy. This chariot was considered to be the finest in all of Savatthi. It should be borne in mind that Jāṇussoṇī might not be his personal name, but might be a title referring to the rank he held as chaplain to the king of Kosala. The sutta was probably given at Jetavana temple, as this is within riding distance of Jāṇussoṇī's home in Savatthi, Shravasti in the slide. So, there are 3 items of background to the Jāṇussoṇī Sutta which I need to explain before we embark on the manuscript itself, for it to make full sense. So, concerning the contemporary funeral practices in India at the time, on the tenfold path of unwholesomeness, and on the Buddhist idea of what constitutes food. So the first item of context I need to explain is about contemporary funeral practices at that time in India. In the prevailing religion at that time in India, funerary dedication for deceased relatives had been part of the Brahmin religion since about 1500 BCE. In fact, the custom of a death anniversary is still practiced in India down to the present day in some places, where the death day of one's parents involves a number of rituals and offerings. Balls of rice, or pinda, are traditionally offered on a pita shrine, due to the belief that one's ancestors still need to be fed by their descendants. For the Brahmins, such a sacrifice dedicated to one's pitters must be performed on a daily basis. Later, Hindu texts such as the Mahabharata established the concept of the living performing pious deeds for the benefit of their departed ancestors. It was considered to be the duty of every male descendant to perform rites for their pitters. So, let's say that you had a relative who died and you were afraid that in their afterlife they were going to starve. Then you would bring a little bit of food and put it on an altar for them every day, and somehow they'd be able to eat what you had put out for them. So that was the prevailing Hindu or Brahmanical belief in those days. So people would bring a whole lot of offerings for the dead. In this sutta, Jāṇussoṇī mentions this ritual by the name of a shraddha, which even these days means a death anniversary ritual. Next, I need to explain the tenfold path of unwholesomeness, which is the list of 10 things that led to the Jāṇussoṇī Sutta being placed in the Anguttara Nikaya's Book of Tens. For each of the items, the Buddha explains compliance or non-compliance with a list of behaviors during a person's human lifetime is used to justify the difference in afterlife destination when they pass away, and hence whether they are in a fit state to receive merits dedicated to them. The list of 10 behaviors I'm talking about are a set of ideals comprising absolute avoidance of killing, stealing, committing adultery, telling lies, engaging in malicious gossip, speaking harshly, chattering idly, intending to take the possessions of others, vengeful intentions, and wrong view. We've met up with this before in blessing number 9, when we talked about the ideal to be aimed for and training oneself in self-discipline according to the precepts. Third issue, which needs a little bit of introduction, is the way food or nutriment is understood in Buddhism. In Buddhism, the word food or ahara refers not only to everything in our diet, but also what we consume and what sustains us in our current state of existence. Buddhists talk about many different sorts of food, and one list in the Samyutta Nikaya gives 4 different sorts of food, consisting of physical nutriment or kavalinggarahara, the sensual nutriment of coming into contact with things via our senses or pasahara, the nutriment of reaching out with mental volition or mano sanjetanahara, and the nutriment consisting of consciousness or vijnanahara. So, if these 4 operate to sustain beings on different levels of existence, it may be that if offered merit in place of that food, it may be sufficient or insufficient to nourish them. For example, when we live in the human realm, we are reliant on physical food that comes on plates and which is eaten with a spoon or chopsticks, something we chew and digest. That's what keeps humans alive. If merit helps humans stay alive, it can help only in the background. In non-human realms of existence, the sort of food which supports life will also be different from that in the human realm. You may remember back to our study of the Aganya Sutta, where we learned about celestial beings which should have been sustained by the delight of meditation, but instead gave in to temptation of solid human food, and this had many negative consequences. By contrast, in the hell realms, the thing that sustains them, which they all have in common, no matter what level of hell realm they have ended up in, is constant suffering and pain. That's what keeps them in those hell realms. For the hell realms, it is continuous suffering of one sort or another. So the overview of this sutta we are about to look at today is that the Buddha says that there are some afterlife destinations where, even though well-meaning Buddhists wish to dedicate merit for deceased relatives, there are some afterlife destinations where those relatives cannot profit from the dedication, and this includes the hell realms, animal realms, human realms, and heaven realms. On a brighter note, the main afterlife destination where deceased relatives can profit from dedication are the ghost or peta realms, and from a ceremonial point of view within Buddhist tradition, you will see the pouring of water from a jug into a bowl as a recurring symbol of the outpouring of positive merit energy from the giver to the receiver at various points during today's presentation. So, opening up the translation at the first page, I will start by apologizing for the rather archaic translation it's written in, which, although clunky, has the clarity of at least being literal. So we start by looking at the first paragraph where Jāṇussoṇī asks the Buddha, Master Gotama, let me tell you, we have Brahmins, so-called, who give charitable gifts. We make the Shraddha offerings to the dead, saying, may this gift to our kinsmen and blood relations who are dead and gone be of profit. May our kinsmen and blood relations who are dead and gone enjoy this offering. Pray, Master Gotama, does that gift profit our kinsmen and blood relations dead and gone? Do they really enjoy that gift? So, what Jāṇussoṇī is asking is, suppose you have a family member who has passed away, if instead of merely mourning them, you choose to do something more positive, maybe a good deed by being generous, keeping the precepts, or meditating, and you dedicate the merit arising from that deed for the benefit of your deceased family member, so you share the positivity of what you've done for the benefit of those loved ones who passed away, does the positive energy actually reach them? Or are we just kidding ourselves to think that we can share some of this positive energy for the benefit of people who are already dead? So in the final 2 lines of this paragraph, the Buddha replies, well, Brahmin, if there be ground for it, it does profit them. But if there be no ground, it will not profit them. So if you try translating this into more contemporary English, what the Buddha is saying is, whether it benefits the departed or not, depends. And as usual, such a short answer does not really satisfy the person who asked the question. So in paragraph 2, Jāṇussoṇī requested a more detailed explanation from the Buddha. He wants to know what it depends on. So if we read further down this paragraph, we come to the first category of cases in which dedicating merit to the departed doesn't reach them, what Woodward and Rhys Davis translate as purgatory, but which I'm going to call the hell realms. And as we come to line 3 of the slide, we are told about the case where people have ended up in some of the hell realms. So they haven't made a very good job of living their human lives, having contravened all the 10 paths of unwholesomeness, which I explained earlier, and who have no other redeeming qualities. When they die, they pass into one of the hell realms. So while detained in the hell realms, the food they're living on is pain and suffering. That's their lot in life if they're in the hell realm. So if a well-meaning relative dedicates some of the merit to them, hoping it's going to sustain them or rescue them, it is not a good fit. It's not going to help them out because what they're feeding off is suffering for as long as their past karma hasn't worn off yet. So being in the hell realm is not something which is very desirable, let's say. So the Buddha is saying that if you have a relative who's ended up in a hell realm and you dedicate merit for them, then the chances are that it's not going to be able to help them at that time. The second case where merit dedicated is not going to be of any use to your deceased relatives is where they have been reborn as an animal. So what happens if one of your relatives also didn't make a very good job of keeping to the tenfold path of wholesomeness, but not as badly as would earn themselves a place in the hell realms? So moving on to paragraph 3, we see that in the next life round, they end up as some sort of animal. So you might look around you and mistakenly think, well, my dead relative's probably gone to a much better place. But you didn't realize the stray dog skulking on the corner is your new relative in a new guise. Again, if you are a four-legged creature or whatever, the sort of food which you will be surviving off is physical food, so not so different from human food, but certainly merit is not what they want. They would much prefer another kind of dog food or whatever to sustain them in that level of being. So again, if your relative has been born in the animal realm, then dedicating merit for them is not going to impress them very much. So turning to paragraph 4, if a person had managed to conform to the tenfold path of wholesomeness during their human lifetime, but had not done any particularly good deeds either, after leaving the human realm, they may come back more or less immediately to be reborn as a human again. The sort of food that sustains human beings would be physical food, familiar to us as belonging to the 5 main food groups recommended to us by the US Department of Agriculture. So therefore, at least on the physical level, merit is not what we really need from our former relatives. Turning to paragraph 5, the next realm where dedicated merit will not have a direct effect on the lives of deceased relatives will be if they have arisen in the heaven realms, or as it says in this translation, in the company of devas. So again, in the heaven realm, beings do not survive on solid food, although they survive on subtle merit to some extent. In fact, if you are in a heaven realm, then you are supported by a specific sort of food as well. Sometimes it's like, if we borrow the Christian term ambrosia, which is what would nourish an angelic being. So if you dedicate merit for them, they can receive it to some extent, but it's not really the food which is designed for them. If those angelic beings do receive merit, they can have a state of life which is maybe of a better quality than it would be if they lacked it. In Buddhism, there are different levels of heaven as well, so it's not like everyone's all in the same heaven, whether you're a saint or someone who's got into heaven by the skin of your teeth, as it would be according to the Christian doctrine. In Buddhism, there are actually different levels of heaven as well, so you can actually go from one level of heaven to another if there's an input of more merit. But even angels are in a less privileged position than human beings because all they can do is be glad for others who are doing some sort of good deed. Their opportunities to do something really exceptional, to change the course of their existence, is also rather limited. And they actually look upon the human realm as more fortunate than their own state of being, because human beings have the free will to change something in their life for the better. So having examined all the states of existence where deceased relatives cannot receive our merit dedications, before moving on to examine the case where beings can receive our dedicated merit, let's take a break halfway and settle ourselves for 40 minutes of meditation, which today is a recent recording of a meditation entitled 5 Stages of Loving Kindness. If at this time you would like to find a comfortable sitting position for yourself as you listen to my guidance. So as you start by coming back to yourself, you may notice your mind becoming more settled as your thinking begins to quieten down. And then you can let your eyelids gently close and let your awareness turn naturally inwards. You start by being aware of your body, letting your awareness begin a journey, a voyage of exploration throughout your body, beginning perhaps with the parts of your body that are in contact with your cushion, letting that contact have a grounding, stabilizing effect on your mind, and expanding your awareness from those points of contact into the rest of your body. And as you become aware of each muscle, of each group of muscles, you can let go, let them relax and soften. Letting your feet relax, your legs, your hips, being aware of your back, of your spine, and letting it be relaxed and responsive. Letting your spine move freely with the movements of your body caused by your breath. Notice your shoulders rising with every in-breath, relaxing every time you breathe out. And as you begin to relax more deeply, you may start to notice certain sensations in your hands and your fingers. Noticing the muscles on the back of your neck, the muscles supporting your skull, and letting them lengthen and soften. The back of your neck, long and relaxed and open. Your chin very slightly and comfortably tucked in. Your head balanced effortlessly on top of your spine. Your jaw relaxed. Your eyes soft behind closed eyelids. Your brow free from tension, soft, relaxed. And then become aware of all the experiences in your body, continuing to relax, letting go of any tensions. And while you're being aware of your body, in the midst of all these experiences, you can notice the sensations of your breathing, letting your breath be relaxed and natural. Your body expanding on each in-breath, and as you release on the out-breath, your body relaxing. So every time you exhale, there is a natural sense of relaxation throughout your body. Every muscle relaxing and letting go. So be aware of that natural phase of relaxation and let it go a little deeper with every out-breath. So with every exhalation, you can sense a wave of relaxation sweeping downward through your body, sweeping away tensions, leaving your body relaxed and helping to calm your mind. And the more you notice this wave of relaxation, the deeper your calmness becomes. And continuing by letting the momentum of your awareness carry you through these still, quiet points, helping you to keep a continuous awareness of the cycle of your breathing, letting your breathing be relaxed and natural, noticing your body opening with each in-breath, noticing your body relaxing with each out-breath. Maintaining an awareness of this alternating pattern of expansion and energy. So at this point, we allow the mind to reach inward towards the source of light inside us for a few moments, while always maintaining a sense of relaxation the whole of the time. It is a kind of inner awakening fueled by the inner light in the mind. At this level of description, the shape of the mind is spherical, a sphere that shines with an inner light, a round sphere that's self-illuminating. By resting the mind at this point, the source is illuminated by the bright inner light in the mind. All you need to do is immerse yourself in the bright, silvery inner light as it shines its radiance forth. Allow the light, or the inner feeling of light, to continue on and on, with the mind shining forth its radiance. And now that we've learned to initiate inner brightness by ourselves, we reach inwardly with the mind, reaching gently with our awareness toward the inner light shining in the mind at the center of the body. The inner light foretells the arising of peace in the mind, like the light before dawn. The inner light replicates the real, spherical nature of the mind, and we continue to connect with the source of the inner light as continuously as we can, for as long as we can. If you find yourself becoming distracted from time to time, simply acknowledge the activity of your mind and direct your attention back to your center. The reality of meditation is that in the beginning, it's always going to be this gentle back and forth. So pay attention to this process of moving away from the center and coming back. And as you do so, the movement of the attention will leave you unfazed, allowing you to come back again and again, and cultivating a sense of patience and gentleness with yourself. You never have to push anything away. You never have to try to control or fix your thoughts. If at any time during the meditation you realize that the mind's wandered off or got caught up in thinking, it's no problem, because that's just what it's used to doing. But we give it something different. We reintroduce it to the center, observing at the center. Every time we bring our awareness back to the center, it will allow us to dive deep to where the stillness and calm is, and to where the beauty of the mind is. So tell yourself that there's nothing that you have to get right or to perfect. You simply remain curious and observe in the present moment. You're simply getting to know the center and observing its qualities. You're creating space between yourself and your thoughts, and tapping into that still, silent place. If thoughts return, we do our best to ignore them. If ignoring the thoughts proves ineffective, we can make use of the traditional mantra instead, using the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang. The more we say the mantra, the more power we give to the words of the mantra, and the more benefit they will bring in calming our mind. They will start to lead deeper toward a sense of purity in the mind, So we feel these words resonating within our heart and within every cell, every fiber of our being, with each repetition of the mantra. It may seem hard in the beginning to meditate, but it gets easier with practice. It's only difficult because we are so familiar with projecting our awareness outside of ourselves, to get caught up with material people and objects and situations in the outside world, with all the sense objects, whether it be enticing sights, sounds, perfumes, tastes, or tactile sensations. So the difficulty is that every time we bring the mind back inside us, it will go looking for external distractions all over again. Because this is what it's used to doing, like a fish out of water, looking for distraction, entertainment, obsession, entanglement. So we have to give ourselves the time and the opportunity to get used to internalizing the mind. If our mind gets distracted by external things, never mind, but we gradually bring it back again each time. The other possible difficulty is with our expectations for progress. We know all the advantages of making a breakthrough in our meditation. We know it'll bring us an inner refuge of happiness and a special understanding of life. There's no problem in wanting progress, but we have to make sure we don't crave after it too much. We should use our motivation to give us the willingness to put in the hours of meditation, but not while we are actually meditating. Ironically, if we crave to stop the mind, it will just make it all the more elusive, because we try to force images into our mind, or tense up our eyes, or try to stare down into our stomach, which is a physical impossibility. Much better is just to start out with the feeling as if there is an object inside us to focus on. So it starts with a feeling rather than something visible, and this will reduce our tendency to manufacture inner experiences or to try too hard. We have to trust that the inner experience we require is already in there somewhere, and all we need to do is tune our mind to the same level of subtlety. We have to trust that, one way or another, the experience will come to us sooner or later, so there's no need to make an artificial effort. So in the meantime, we continue in this way, lightly and gently for a few more moments in silence, until we come to the appropriate time. So we continue to keep our mind gently on track at the center of the body. Often it comes down to familiarity with the technique rather than theoretical knowledge of the meditation. There are many examples of those with no previous background to meditation, but who stumble across the proper balance in meditation. And when their mind comes into equilibrium, they will attain progress in their meditation in just the same way as those who are knowledgeable about the meditation theory. Their awareness will pass deeper through the center, and they experience happiness on the inside. Happiness that will keep their mind in place on the inside the whole of the time, and which will cause the mind to move inward toward inner peace. It's not that person's imagination, but it is a real experience that exists inside the consciousness of every living person. This is why we need to keep on training ourselves every day in meditation, and in between meditation sessions maintain mindfulness at the center of the body. Our mind will be connected continuously at the center, and will be linked into that stream of purity flowing up from our center. In the meantime, we shouldn't obsess too much about the center of the body. There's definitely no need for us to go looking for it, or to worry about if we got there yet. But we should remind ourselves that the mind doesn't like to be forced to do anything. If anything, it prefers tender loving care. So we just put our mind in neutral without worrying about the center of the body. We should just let our mind coast, or imagine that the target size of the center of the body has enlarged to the very horizons around us, as if we were already sitting in the middle of the center of the body, so that we don't need to do anything more, with nothing to add and nothing more to adjust. So for now we continue to train the mind gently until it becomes centered in inner happiness for a few more moments in silence until we come to time for some loving kindness meditation. We continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body. And for the final part of our meditation today, we're going to practice loving kindness meditation in 5 sequential stages to allow us to develop this emotion of loving kindness within ourselves. So we continue to maintain a sense of ease and comfort and relaxation at the center of ourselves. We gather up the sensations at the center of ourselves, and we continue to allow the sense of relaxation and ease to deepen with our awareness into our center, becoming aware of whatever feelings and emotions are present. Those feelings and emotions may be very subtle, or they may have a very definite and strong presence. We don't have to be able to put a name to these emotions for the time being. Whatever is there, we accept them because this is where we're starting from. There's only one place that we can start from, and that is where we are. So we look for a sense of contentment, a place to start out from where we are, whatever our emotional state may be. So sometimes we might have a sense that our emotions occupy a volume of space in or around our body. Sometimes they may seem to have a texture or color. So we just notice these impressions. We notice with a sense of contentment, starting from wherever we are, aware that we can patiently work with whatever we're experiencing. Patiently, confidently, bringing them gently to our center, accepting that these emotions will change at their own rate, just as seeds watered and cared for in the soil will respond to nourishment and will change and grow at their own rate. Accepting that change is happening in time in response to this practice, and remaining aware of how we're feeling at our center, we can begin the first stage of the loving kindness meditation by wishing ourselves well, cultivating an attitude of appreciation and care for ourselves. And we can do this simply by dropping the words within our intention, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. And slowly and with care, from our center we allow the effects of these kind intentions to ripple gently through our emotions. We might imagine our emotions as being like a still forest pool. And as we drop the intention, may we be well, may we be happy, may we be free from suffering into our center, it's as if we're dropping a flower into the still waters, being aware of the effects of the flower falling into the water, being aware of the ripples spreading outwards. It may also help to think of a time when we felt particularly well and happy. We can call to mind some time from our past when we had that sense of well-being and contentment. And we can recreate that experience once more, magnifying and multiplying the feeling of confidence and ease by dropping the intention, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. And for a few moments, patiently and kindly, with care and love, we wish ourselves well. And if we ever become aware that our mind has wandered, then we bring our awareness kindly and patiently back to our body, to our center, and continue to wish ourselves well. And from there we can move to the second stage of the loving-kindness practice, where we can call to mind a good friend, someone that we have a close connection with, someone whose well-being is important to us. And we can wish our friend well with the intention, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering. And conjuring up these intentions with meaning and conviction, we notice what changes are taking place in our emotions in response to these intentions. The changes may be subtle or quite noticeable. They may not be the changes we expect, but we just notice what happens and continue to observe what happens with our emotions as we wish our friend well. And then moving on to the third stage of the loving kindness, you can put your friend to one side for now and call to mind a neutral person, someone that you don't have any special feelings towards. You may neither particularly like them, nor do you have any particular aversion towards them. It might be someone that you see quite regularly, perhaps at a supermarket checkout, in your workplace, or on the street. Call this person to mind and begin to wish him or her well, with the intention, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering. And although you know little or nothing about this person's life, you share something very profound and powerful in common with them. The fact that they, like you, wish to find happiness, that they wish to be free from suffering. So the more you're aware of them being like you in this respect, the more you can wish him or her well in a heartfelt way. Moving to the fourth stage of the loving kindness, you can put the neutral person to one side and call to mind someone you know but have difficulties with, someone with whom you experience conflict or a sense of strain. When you call this person to mind, you may have a sense of discomfort. So just notice that gut response, that feeling, and at the same time wish him or her well from your center. May you be well, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering. Like you, this person wants to be happy and free from suffering. And as you move into the fifth and final stage of the loving kindness meditation, you can call to mind all four people, yourself, your friend, the neutral person, and the difficult person, and wish all four people well, while making the intention that all four be well and happy, with the intention, may we be well, may we be happy, may we all be free from suffering. We can imagine all four people being well and happy, and being in harmony. You might notice a tendency to discriminate, to not want to give your loving kindness equally to all four people. we try to overcome that tendency and spread our good wishes evenly. And from there we can begin to spread our good wishes in wider and wider circles, wishing that everyone who's around us be well and happy. People in the building that we're in, around the building, in the neighborhood. Wishing well to everyone in our town and in the area around our town. Perhaps having a sense of our loving kindness, our good wishes, radiating outwards. Perhaps like a warm golden radiance from our center, moving outwards in all directions, with the intention, may all beings be well, may all beings be happy, may all beings be free from suffering, expanding the sphere of our loving kindness, embracing all sentient beings on the planet, all beings capable of experiencing suffering or joy, imagining them well and happy, in harmony, living in peace, enjoying the sense of radiating loving kindness from our own center, outwards in all directions. So we sit for a few more moments in silence, enjoying the fruits of the loving kindness practice, appreciating and enjoying our experience, noticing whatever emotional changes have taken place. And we can appreciate the effort that we've been making, since very few people consciously spend time cultivating positive emotions. So what we've been doing is very rare and precious, worthy of appreciation. So in this way we sit for a few more moments, enjoying the fruits of the loving kindness practice, appreciating and enjoying our experience for the last few moments of our meditation together. Sappa Buddhanupavena, Sappa Dhammanupavena, Sappa Saṅkhanupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for today, and you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So to return gradually to our topic for today of the Jāṇussoṇī Sutta, we now examine the case where deceased relatives are reborn in a state where they can receive the merit we dedicate to them, which is called the peta realm. So we turn to paragraph 6, where we learn about deceased relatives being able to receive merit dedicated to them. Here the word peta, which you can see in italics, usually refers to a certain sort of not particularly fortunate realm of existence known as the realm of hungry ghosts. But as the translation correctly notes, by rendering the term the region of the departed, it means afterlife destinations more broadly than just hungry ghosts. So we know that the term is not broad enough to include heaven, hell, animals, or humans, as we've already crossed these off our list as no ground for dedicated merit. So, what we are left with and what the word peta refers to in the sutta are ghosts and possibly hungry ghosts. So to avoid confusion about the difference between ghosts and hungry ghosts, you can look back at the B062 session I did on the 31 realms of existence, where regular ghosts are the disembodied spirits living among regular people in the human realm, who have an existence which is transitory, in that they have not yet gone to a better or a worse place. Such beings can benefit from the merit which you dedicate to them because they are a sort of witness to what you're doing. Meanwhile, hungry ghosts that can also benefit from merit and maybe can be considered as a sort of career ghost are the sort of beings which are hungry but unable to eat and generally inhabit a space beneath Mount Sunero in the scheme of Buddhist cosmology. According to Buddhists, merit dedication practices are particularly out of consideration for the spirits of recently deceased relatives, which are still hanging around. Sociologists often have mistaken understanding of these practices, dismissing them as primitive ancestor worship or fetishism. But the veneration part mostly comes from Confucian tradition, whereas the Buddhist motivation is more like a dutiful wish to alleviate the suffering of their departed ones. The origin of Buddhist merit dedication for deceased relatives in the ghostly realms mostly comes from a different sutta in the Peta called the Tirokuddha Sutta, which is sometimes translated as the Discourse on the Grateful Dead, with apologies to Jerry Garcia, or Those Outside the Walls. In the time of the Buddha, King Bimbisara was going to perform a big merit-making ceremony, and when that news got around, then all the spirits that had ever been his relatives all came wafting along from all different corners of the earth, hoping that he was going to dedicate the merit for their benefit. These hungry ghosts had been waiting for aeons and aeons for someone to dedicate the merit. The Buddha was the recipient of the merit-making in the form of a meal from King Bimbisara. What the Buddha could see, but which the king couldn't, was that outside the walls of the hall, where the merit-making ceremony was about to take place, all his relatives were waiting around the walls of the house for the moment when Bimbisara was going to dedicate merit for their benefit. Unfortunately, Bimbisara was so taken with this great good deed that at the end of the ceremony he forgot completely to dedicate merit by pouring water. Consequently, there was a horrible screeching and wailing sound, which I guess ghosts make, from all around the house, and the king became very frightened. He was mostly frightened because he couldn't see where the noises were coming from, this screeching, moaning sound. So, we can see them outside the windows in this slide. It was at this time the Buddha made those spirits visible to the king and instructed him that these were his relatives from previous lives, and he had forgotten something critical to the ceremony, which is that he should have poured water to dedicate merit which had arisen for the benefit of all those spirits who were expecting this of him. So he offered another meal the next day, and this time he did not neglect to pour the water in dedication. Consequently, the hungry ghosts were able to receive the merit and be reborn in a better place. From that time onwards, it became a tradition that if you do a significant act of goodness, whether it's offering a meal or going on a weekend of meditation, at the end of that event, you dedicate merit for your loved ones of yours who have passed away. So, this is the historical origin of this tradition in Buddhism. So, returning to today's sutta and moving on to paragraph 7, what Jāṇussoṇī asks next is, what happens if the relative has not yet reached the place where they are in a state that can receive the merit? So the Buddha says it's unlikely that there will be no one around who has never been one of your relatives before. And to explain this comment, you might have heard, especially from Tibetan tradition, that Buddhists tend to say that there's no one in the world who has never been a mother or a father to you. In the past, in the cycle of existence, which has no beginning and no end. So there's no one you can see around you who's never been your mother or your father before, and therefore in Tibetan tradition they have a sense of gratitude towards every form of life, every form of living being, every person. You may remember a scene from the 1997 movie 7 Years in Tibet, where the monastery wanted to dig the foundations for a new building, and all the monks were bringing the earthworms up from the hole and carefully putting them in a new place. They were afraid that the earthworms were going to be harmed. And the Western protagonist in the movie asks, "Why are you doing that?" And the monks replied, "Well, we're not sure whether in the previous lifetime this earthworm was our mother, so we don't want to risk being ungrateful to our mother because it would be very bad indeed." So those monks were being very kind even to the earthworms. And maybe another little example, by way of comparison, would be like where you take a bowl of fruit to cheer up someone in hospital and they're not in a fit state to eat it. The bowl of fruit may not benefit the patient, but the doctors and nurses who pass through the ward on their rounds, when they find that the patient can't eat the fruit, then maybe they will take a few grapes home for themselves. It does benefit someone in the end. In addition, there may be a holding over of the merit, a possibility not mentioned specifically in this sutta on the subject of holding over merit. And to continue the metaphor, it may be that you again go to visit someone in hospital with a gift of fruit which you hope is going to cheer them up, but it turns out that they've got such a bad medical condition and they're suffering so much that they can't eat solid food at the moment. It doesn't mean that it's a wasted gift because the patient isn't going to be in critical condition forever. Similarly, if you are familiar with the nature of realms of rebirth in Buddhism, nothing lasts forever. So even though they may be in a hell realm right now or some other realm where they cannot receive the merit immediately, eventually that gift will be of use to them as soon as they get out of that realm first of all. It's just like when your friend in hospital gets out of the intensive care unit, back onto the general ward, they will be able to benefit from the fruit that has been held over for them there. So it's the same sort of thing with merit dedicated. It doesn't disappear completely, but it will be held over and be of benefit to them sometime in the future. And usually the mechanism used to explain this is the holding over merit for them at the crossroads of the unfortunate realms, a place called purgatory for real, or Yamaloka, where the merit helps to reduce the severity of the bad karma on that person's tab. Returning to paragraph 8, Jāṇussoṇī asks anyway, in the case that there really is no one who has been our past relative, what would happen to the merits then? At which point the Buddha replies that certainly doing a good deed on the behalf of the departed does benefit someone. The Buddha says that in the worst case scenario, at the very least it is you, the giver, who benefits from the good deed. Even if there's no one around to rejoice in what you've done, then it does benefit you. So turning to paragraph 9, Jāṇussoṇī then asks about cases of mixed karma. He starts by asking about the case where a person has imperfectly complied with the tenfold path of wholesomeness, but has redeemed themselves by performing acts of generosity during their lifetime. The Buddha replies, from the third line down, that in cases where a being has been lax in their precepts, but has performed acts of generosity, they will arise as a well-cared-for animal, namely in the company of elephants, and alternatives to this are seen with mentions in paragraph 10 arising as a horse or a cow or chickens. Jāṇussoṇī then asked in paragraph 11 about cases where a person has complied with the tenfold path of wholesomeness and has also practiced generosity during their lifetime, but not enough to earn a place in the heaven realms. The Buddha explained that the person will arise again in the human realm, will be well provided for in all the 5 sensual delights belonging to human beings. So what we learn from the sutta today is that merit dedicated for the departed sometimes reaches them and sometimes doesn't. If it does not reach your dearly departed, it is because they have been reborn in a realm where the necessary nourishment is not merit but something else. Suffering in the case of the hell realms, fodder in the case of the animal realms, daily bread in the case of humans, and their own merit in the case of celestial beings. However, if our dearly departed end up in the peta realm, which we have defined as the realm of ghosts or hungry ghosts, then they will receive the merit directly. If the relation is not in a state that can profit from that merit, other petas that are relatives of ours will profit instead. And if neither the intended or other relations are in an accessible state, the merit will be held over for them until it can profit them in the future. And even in the case where the merit goes unclaimed, it still profits the devotee who makes the merit dedication in the first place. Finally, in the case of people with a mixture of good and bad karma from their human life, those who have erred into the tenfold path of unwholesomeness, but who have cultivated generosity, will arise as a well cared for animal, and those who have not erred into the tenfold path of unwholesomeness and have cultivated generosity, but not enough to be born in the heaven realms, will arise as a well cared for human being. This is why Buddhists believe it is useful to do things to benefit the departed. Even if it doesn't benefit the departed immediately, it benefits people in general, or at the very least it benefits you, the giver. So this is the main origin of the cultural practices which you see in Buddhism about dedicating merit for the departed. So in my estimation, the sutta leaves us with at least 4 issues which need some further explanation. The logic of cremation or burial, how one person's merit can be shared with another, the objectives of a Buddhist funeral, and some examples of Buddhist funerary rites and their logic. So the first issue is the logic of cremation or burial. So in the Buddhist world, there are a variety of funerary practices. Some involve cremation and sprinkling of the ashes. Some involve cremation and enshrining of the ashes at a memorial. Some involve burial of the corpse. Having a memorial or a grave, of course, means that there is a physical place where the living beings can go to honor their dead. I noticed in Sri Lanka, graves are an option often chosen in the case that parents have lost a child, in which case the mourning process is likely to be particularly acute. The cremation with a memorial is practiced in Japan, China, and Korea, where there is a particular day of the year, such as Qingming, in the Buddhist calendar, allocated for remembering the dead or doing merit on their behalf. In Thailand, where ashes are scattered, the emphasis is placed on letting go of the departed, although dedication of merit continues as an annual anniversary of the loved one's death without any physical memento of them beyond their photograph. What you notice is that despite the variety of approaches to funerals in Buddhism, none put emphasis on the intactness of the corpse, as it may be in other religions. By contrast, Buddhist funerals give importance to the spiritual component of the deceased rather than the body, because it is believed that merit is transferred from mind to mind rather than to the remnant of the deceased's body. So, it makes no difference whether a person's body is cremated or buried, because the spiritual component of that person, in other words, the mind, is what outlives them. So, merit is an energy which arises in our own mind. We would dedicate part of that energy to the mind of wherever the spiritual part of that deceased person has gone. Once the physical body breaks up at death, then what lives on of them would be the part of them which would receive that merit. Second issue raised is how one person's merit can be shared to another person. Normally, the logic of karma means that if you do a good deed, then the outcome of the good karma will come back to you personally. But what we see explained in the Jāṇussoṇī Sutta is the extent to which the goodness a person does can be dedicated or transferred to a third party in the form of a deceased person. At first, this might seem to be counterintuitive, but as I told you in my session B004, amongst the 10 punya kiriya watu, or ways to generate merit, transfer of merit is acknowledged as a way of generating merit for ourselves. Furthermore, we regularly practice loving-kindness meditation to share the benefits of our loving-kindness to others. You might wonder how others can receive the merit from you. And the way it is expected to work is that the recipient needs to have the intention to rejoice in the merit which you have done for them. So they appreciate or congratulate you on what you have done for them. And it is the act of congratulation which leads to some amount of the merit arising in the recipient. This congratulatory behavior is part of the temple culture, and it is why you often hear Thai people say the word sadhu, which actually means well done, when they see someone else doing something good. It's not just good for the person who's done it, but also the people who are glad for them will also gain some benefit rather than just being jealous, and consequently they derive a part of the goodness for themselves as well. Not the whole of it, but a small part of it, let's say 10%, without diminishing the merit yielded to the doer. So in theory, you could get a person who doesn't actually do any good deeds, but who just goes around saying sadhu whenever they see anyone else doing something good. They say sadhu, and they get 10% from every person. But in practice, what we normally recommend is that you do good deeds for yourself, and then you get the whole 100% of the good deed. But if you're already dead, then you can't do the good deed for yourself anymore. You would have to rely on saying sadhu to people who are still alive and doing good deeds. So, dedication of merit is giving the chance for deceased relatives to rejoice in the deeds that we have done on their behalf. And I will mention that in the picture of the Thai funeral goers pouring the water, they are holding onto each other's shoulders as if an electrical connection were necessary. But as I said earlier, merit dedication is from heart to heart, so you don't need to be physically touching the person pouring the water. The third issue arising from this sutta concerns the objectives of a Buddhist funeral. Most other religions' funerary practices are designed only to diffuse grief, but the objectives of a Buddhist funeral run to at least 6 things, which includes the cultivation of merit on behalf of the deceased in all the ways I've just mentioned. Beyond this, though, funerals are also designed to change the attitudes of those who attend and to study the principles of Dharma in life by confronting mortality as a part of life, usually by Dharma sermons given at the funeral. These teachings will allow the participants then to put Dharma into practice in their everyday lives. Funerals are also the opportunity for forgiveness to be encouraged between participants and the deceased, so there are no unresolved issues to hold the deceased back from going to a better place. A further objective is that Buddhist funerals are meant to be a celebration of life, by being an opportunity to recollect the good deeds, teachings, and example the deceased did during their life. And finally, attending a funeral is an important way to show support and compassion for the bereaved relatives. A final issue brought up by the sutta is how Buddhists put these funeral objectives into practice. In many of my funeral homilies, which I've talked about on my own YouTube channel, I've talked about how funerals are celebrated in the Buddhist tradition. For example, the tradition of memorial ceremonies with Abhidhamma chanting for the first 7 days, Matika chanting for 50 days, and after 100 days from the passing. In these cases, if the deceased is still around in spirit, then they can see that something good is being done on their behalf, and it can help to remind the deceased of something good which they've done, which they may have overlooked, in order to be able to go then to a better place. Oh yes, and in the case you are wondering about the photograph, in many Laotian and Thai families, all the grandsons of a deceased person are often encouraged to ordain as novices for a few days during the funeral in order to dedicate merit for their grandparent who has passed away. And in Buddhism, it's often seen as a responsibility of a person towards relatives of theirs who have passed away to dedicate merit for their loved ones, because out of familiarity, spirits will tend to return to their former haunts, and they have pinned a certain amount of hope on faithful relatives to do something for them. Therefore, if the bereaved family are doing a funeral dedication, it is going to be of more benefit to the departed than it would be to some random spirit who is not related to them, simply because they have that familiarity with the family and what they're doing, and that they will tend to return to that place. In theory, though, anyone could do a good deed, and it can potentially remind the recently deceased of goodness which they've done. The deceased can be witness to it, in order to remind them perhaps of some goodness which they themselves have done in the past. So now we come to the part of our program where we try to find some good answers to questions sent in by viewers. And as you might expect today's topic of death, merit, and funerals seems to have raised a lot of doubts in people's minds. So, turning to my first question, which has been sent in by Lee Bruce of Chino Hills, here comes his question. Listening to Prajan's peacetime presentations, you often explain the proof for the existence of merit as being a warm, fuzzy feeling on the inside. To me, this seems like a very rough and ready way to recognize if merit occurred, and might mislead some people to con themselves into thinking that merit has happened when it has not. My question is, are we supposed to just use our own feelings as a criteria for whether something is good or bad? Because it may be a very unreliable way of making ethical decisions. Hi Lee, and thank you for your question. In order to clarify and perhaps get a complete answer to this question, you would need to look into the whole ethical issue of subjective relativism. It's true that some people, especially those with sociopathic tendencies, might have an inaccurate sense of whether they're doing something good or not. They might use their miscalibrated conscience to justify all sorts of aggression and carnage. I once met a really skeptical guy, and he said I can't be bothered to keep the 5 precepts because I don't care if I kill mosquitoes. He explained, well, I don't care about killing mosquitoes, therefore if I do it, it's not wrong because it doesn't go against my conscience. So I had to explain to him it's not just your conscience which counts here. We also need to factor in the well-being of the mosquito you're killing into the moral equation. Your conscience alone is not an accurate measure in this case. You have to take other objective external factors into consideration as well. So, when I have mentioned that merit helps you to feel good about yourself, it would only apply to people who are within the boundaries of normal discretion, for people who recognize virtue rather than being those of diminished moral responsibility. Only then would the feeling of merit be an emotion which you could trust accurately. I would qualify this by saying that a person's feelings are not the only criterion of what is good or bad. There are many other ways of measuring up merit, but they do tend to take longer to become apparent. For example, you might find that your life improves as a result of the merit you've done, and you find that you have fewer obstacles coming up in your life. You might find that you become a person who is more successful. These would also be things that would tell you that this merit energy is accruing to you. Another example is that you can measure up whether something is good or bad by social criteria. For example, if something is a benefit to yourself and also a benefit to others, a win-win situation, in other words, would be defined in Buddhism as something good, in addition to the quality of your mind being improved by doing something. But on the question of whether something is good or bad, there are many different ways to measure that up. To give yourself a clear idea, in Buddhism, it's not something I'm particularly prepared to talk about today, but in more detail, you might like to look at my A015 on decision-making strategies, where you will hear about at least 10 different ways for defining what is worth doing or not worth doing in Buddhism. So your feeling is just one subjective way, which is relatively accurate for most people. So to a second question which has been sent in by Folger Gao Nang Mai of Ventura County. Here comes a question. Today, you've been talking a lot about ghosts and spirits. When I went to Thailand, I saw a lot of things like fancy birdhouses on poles at the corner of people's backyards. Of course, these are known as spirit houses. What I'd like to know is whether these are the places where deceased family members are supposed to live. Hi there, Volker. Thank you for a question relevant to today's topic. The purpose of spirit houses in Thailand is connected to ghosts, but not really to the funerals of relatives that we've been talking about today. These spirit houses, which are incidentally found all across Southeast Asia and surprisingly enough also in Greece, belong to ghosts that are not considered part of the family, but are resident on the plot of land owned by the family. In a lot of Asian countries where you build a house, it's like you're encroaching into the territory which has previously belonged to resident spirits. So, in order that that spirit is not going to come back and haunt you in your house, you build a special little house for it so that it can be in there and have its own space, and it's not going to come out and wake you up in the middle of the night. So it is like compartmentalizing the local spirit which is on the property. If you're talking about spirits of your own relatives, the place for them is more likely to be a family shrine located inside the house, which I believe is found in Japanese or Vietnamese Buddhism. Third question today, which comes from Linda of Guildford in the UK. Here comes the question. Today you have been talking about people getting reborn as animals, which are better or worse provided for. It seems to me that being born an animal makes little sense in the cycle of rebirth, because if you were to be reborn there, what opportunity would an animal have to do any good deeds to redeem themselves from this destiny? Hi Linda, and thank you for your question. Within Buddhism, to be reborn as an animal is considered to be an unfortunate rebirth, because the opportunities they have to better their existence are, as you say, much more limited than a human being. Let's say you are a dog. You may have some opportunity to better your existence because you could be a seeing eye dog instead of just being a stay-at-home dog, in which case you can do something altruistic for society, which would be a good thing which a dog could do. It is pretty limited compared with the possibilities we have as a human being to do all manner of good things for the world and for ourselves and to improve our spiritual destiny. Animals are also seen as unfortunate because their body is a very different shape from the human template. Furthermore, if you're born as, let's say, a venomous snake, you can't even survive without killing things, so you really are in a very bad situation indeed, karmically speaking. You're trapped in that situation, so this is why, though animals might be cuddly and cute, it's not seen as to be a particularly useful way to be reborn if you are thinking of your long-term spiritual destiny and thinking to improve yourself lifetime by lifetime. Saying that, even the Buddha spent many lifetimes as animals, as you've seen in the Jataka tales, many of which were very noble, and as we saw in session B055 about the Kukara Jataka, some can be smart enough to teach human beings a lot of things as well, but this is seen as to be quite an exceptional case. And our final question for today comes from Zach Joseph of Rosemead, California. Here comes the question. I was very close to my grandmother up to the time she passed away. I had a strange experience in the time leading up to her funeral that she seemed to return to me either as a presence in my bedroom during the night or entering into my dreams. What I'd like to know is whether this is normal or to be expected. Hi Zach, and thank you for your spooky question. Although for some people, visitations by spirits of dead relatives may sound like hallucinations caused by their grieving process, within most Asian Buddhist traditions, especially within the 7 days after a person has passed away, it's almost half expected that basically that their spirit or whatever of that person will come back to say farewells to their family before they go off to a new place within the 7 days. And sometimes it can be a physical presence. Sometimes it may enter into the dreams of that bereaved family. Rather than being seen as a bad thing, although it can seem rather scary, to most Buddhists it is regarded as some sort of consolation to the people who have outlived them, that they are still in the hearts and minds of their loved ones as they leave this place to go to a better one. So for today, that's all the questions we have time for. Today we've been looking at the Jāṇussoṇī Sutta. For my next live session online, which will, fingers crossed, be a week on Sunday morning, we'll move on to look at the Khuddhadanta Sutta, which is about the slightly less supernatural topic of the Buddhist principles of governance and social welfare. So for good measure, I'd like to remind viewers to keep the questions coming about meditation or topics that you've heard in the lecture. And you can send them to the email address that you can see spelled out in the slide, and I'll do my best to answer these questions on my next session. In the meantime, try to avoid recklessness or complacency, maintain a positive mood, speak only positive words, forgive others, extend good wishes to others, and meditate daily. Hopefully, as a result of today's session, you will have a clearer view of the origin of funeral practices within Buddhism and possibly be able to draw upon them, if appropriate, to help you or a loved one overcome their usual sense of finality of losing a family member as part of the grieving process. So that's all for today. Thanks for viewing. So long, folks, and stay safe.